I didn't have the best life when I was alive. Well, not by my standards at least. But don't worry, those standards have really been lowered. In fact, I thought my life was so bad at the time that I tried to take it. Tried to take my own life. I don't quite remember all the reasons why. Well, I can't remember any good reasons. They all seem so stupid now. Not being able to make friends. Feeling worthless. It's not the point anymore, but one day, I do remember stepping into that noose, quite literally. As I kicked the chair out from underneath me, everything went dark. Well, at first, then I opened my eyes. My neck didn't break. Well, not yet. I began to flail around violently, as it really hurt. I could feel my neck slowly breaking as the noose got tighter and tighter, until eventually I heard a very loud crack, and I was unable to move. But I was still alive, still struggling to breathe. But then I felt a cool wash come over me, and a bit of a tingle starting at my head, going all the way down to the tips of my fingers and toes, and then everything went black. Well, not really black, but there was nothing. Not blackness, not emptiness, nothing. I wasn't happy, I wasn't sad, I was just at peace, it seemed. I couldn't really think, all I could do was sit there, in the nothingness. Until again I felt that burning hot feeling around my neck. I heard odd noises all around me. I still couldn't see, everything was still dark. But I felt a burning go throughout my entire body as if my bloodstream itself had become venomous. I was flailing around, next thing I knew, now able to move my body yet again. And I opened my eyes. Well, opened one of my eyes. I was able to feel my face, and though both eyes were open, I couldn't see out of one of them. All I could see was a blackish red blur. I began to flail around, trying to make sense of my surroundings. At first, everything was just bright, as if someone was shining car headlights directly into my face. Everything burned, especially the feeling of that rope around my neck. It was the most pain I've ever felt in my life as I flailed around. Until eventually, I grabbed the noose and I pulled myself up enough to where I could open my eyes at least. My neck fell limp to the side, and I wasn't able to move it, but I was able to use what little strength I had to pull myself up. I looked around me. I had no clue where I was. It was just empty. For all I could see, at least, it was all just empty. I could hear screams and all manner of horrible things in the background. I couldn't move my head, so I was forced to just stare straight into the void. Well, it wasn't really a void, there was no curvature to the land. Well, no real curvature. It was a giant field, it looked like, but with no grass, just dirt forever. Or at least as far as I could see. As I struggled to get free, as I, gave up actually. But after a while, still wasn't dead. First I thought what I was seeing was last-minute hallucinations from when my neck broke, my mind trying to make sense of what was going on, but as I waited, the screams just got louder and louder, and it seemed like I was becoming more and more lucid. More and more lucid to the point where I don't know. It was just obvious to me that what was happening wasn't just an illusion, it was real. So I started trying to get free again after realizing I wasn't going to die. I pulled. Anyway, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. As I tugged, I eventually felt the rope start to give way. My neck shifted and fell flat, chinned against my chest, and I was horrified to see what was underneath me. I don't know what it was, but it was sharp. Obviously something I didn't want to land in. There were a ton of them all around. They were so hot, they were blue. For those of you who don't know much about, smithing, when any metal gets to its absolute hottest point it can be while still being solid, it'll actually turn a glowing blue color. This can only be achieved, though, through repetitively cooling down the metal to harden it and then heating it up again. I did not want to touch those, so I tried to stop moving, but I was already swinging quite vigorously. I felt the noose give way, and I fell, finding myself impaled on whatever those horn-like structures were underneath me. As I slowly slid down, my intestine was caught on the point of it, and I was getting slowly ripped open more and more the further down the spike I fell. I tried to grab it to pull myself back up, but it hurt. That's all it did was hurt. My hands, my stomach, my organs, everything, until eventually my arms gave out and I slid all the way to the bottom with a loud thud. The pain went away, and the pain around my neck started again as I woke up, and again I was on that noose, dangling. I knew there was no way out, so I tried to look around, and I couldn't. Eventually I lifted myself up with one arm, barely able to, as I'm not a very strong person. I can barely lift my own weight with two hands, but I was able to pull myself up just long enough to move my head. And all around me I saw, of course, stone walls. I was in some kind of cave, it looked like, but a cave with a big enough opening that you wouldn't be able to tell just by looking forward. I continued to try to get down, but every time the same thing would happen. The rope would snap, I'd fall on the spikes, I'd feel the burn, and I'd be back up on that noose. This went on for what seemed like days, just over and over again, me trying my best to find some way out, to try to get off that noose and hope I didn't hit a spike, but every time I'd fall and I'd feel the burning sensation as my organs were melted right out of my stomach, every time getting impaled. One time I got impaled through the bottom jaw, and I was left there to hang until eventually I died of starvation. Eventually, however, I had the idea to try to swing the noose as much as I could, so maybe I'd be able to get out. So instead of struggling like I usually did, I swung back and forth as much as I could, till eventually the rope did snap. This time, however, I flew over all the spikes. One caught me by the foot and tore a decent chunk of skin off. Ironically, it wasn't until now that I realized I was completely naked. Well, almost completely naked. I had little remnants of clothes that looked like they had been through just as much hell as I had been through. Little did I know how much that was going to come into play later, but all I knew is that I wanted to get out of here. As I stood up, my neck again felt a loud crack, and my head fell to the side. I couldn't move it or bring it up naturally. I had to move it with my hands. I felt around my neck, and it was twisted and broken, and it had pieces of bone sticking out here and there. My neck had broken. But then, how was I still alive? And more importantly, where was I? I slowly walked out of the cave and looked back to see several more, all lined up right next to each other, seemingly going for infinity, like a row of houses. From each cave I could hear more screaming, more pain. I was horrified to go in, and I decided to walk into that field in front of me, or what I guess was a field, more like a wasteland. I walked, and I walked, and I walked, and I walked, until eventually one of my legs completely snapped from underneath me. I fell to the ground, and I looked back, and my leg was atrophied and completely snapped off, as if I was some kind of mummy that someone didn't handle properly. I started to crawl, or I tried to stand up on my other leg, but it broke too. So I started crawling and crawling and crawling until I was too weak to crawl anymore. I looked up when I heard a noise, and there was feet. I thought I saw a person's feet in front of me, and I grabbed my head and I tilted up the best I could with the little strength I had, and there was a demon or whatever fucking staring down at me. It didn't look like what I expected to see. I mean, at this point, a lot of theories had gone through my head that this was all a bad nightmare. Maybe this was some sort of purgatory, but then when I looked up into that thing's cold, dead, unfeeling eyes, I realized I must be in hell. The thing looked human, but was rotting while still moving. Kind of like a zombie, but the zombie movies looked nothing like this. Nothing like the real thing. I guess I should have guessed no one who had actually never seen a rotting corpse before would be able to imitate it, but the organs inside were still moving. And what horrified me was I noticed the stomach was still moving, meaning something was being digested. The organs seemed to be oozing from in between the creature's ribs, and as it looked down at me, it kneeled. I reached out and asked for help, and then the creature attacked me. It went right for the eyes first, sticking its thumbs in and blinding me, and as I laid there, screaming, I tried to fight it off. Eventually, however, after I felt large amounts of my skin being ripped off, I heard the thing scurry away. I had one arm left, and I could feel my organs dragging on the ground. There should be no way I'm still alive, but I am. So I continue to crawl, and continue to crawl. I'm able to see out of one of my eyes. He didn't get it very well. He just popped it out of the socket, and I was able to pop it back in. Lucky that the muscle didn't tear. I crawled, and I crawled, and I crawled. And I realized the entire time, the screaming I heard from those caves never got any quieter, but I had been moving for at least weeks. I didn't know what was happening. I decided to try my best to look back, and I did, twisting my broken neck full 180 degrees, only to see that all the caves, including the one I was in, were still right there, still right behind me, as if I hadn't moved at all. I broke down, and everything went black again. I woke up yet again to that burning hot noose around my neck, and I did the same maneuver as I did before to escape, only this time, I did wind up losing my foot. I hobbled out of the cave and started screaming and ranting all the cuss words I could think of, just trying to figure out what was going on, until I eventually decided to go into one of the other caves. Inside of the cave, I was horrified, as all there was inside this cave I went in was blood. Not like a pool or a puddle of blood like someone had died, but a deep pool or pond of blood. As I walked towards it, I realized it didn't have a definite bank. It just slowly, there was more dirt than blood. And eventually, as I went further, there was more blood than dirt, until there was no dirt left and it was just blood. I saw bubbles coming up. Bubbles that would then stop. Is someone down there? I thought. Oh, there's someone else, finally. I heard a loud splash, and I looked up quickly, but not in time, as I saw the bubbles coming back from the bottom of the blood pool again. What? I looked up, and there was a small ledge, and on this ledge was another one of those rotting corpses standing there, waiting. It didn't even look down at me, it just kept staring forward with those cold, dead eyes. You know, those eyes are nothing like they tell you in all the horror stories. There was absolutely no life behind them. I don't know how to express it, but that little glint, that little bit of humanity you see behind every single eye you've ever seen. Even from the most depraved person, there's something you see in their eyes, but there was nothing in any of these rotting corpses' eyes. I looked down and saw that the bubbles had stopped again, and I looked back up. From the roof of the cave opened a small flame, and from that flame it turned into a woman. The woman was completely tied up in ropes she seemed to be perpetually wet, even though there was no way, as this place was so unbelievably dry that not even my tongue was moist anymore. The woman herself also seemed to be rotting, although there was a little bit of life behind her eyes, unlike the others. As she was tied up, the decrepit corpse behind her shoved her back off the ledge, and again a loud splash as she landed in the pool of blood, and the bubble started again. I decided to leave, and I checked out another cave. In that cave, all I saw was a man sleeping. Well, what I thought was a man sleeping. As I got closer, I saw that there was a large hole, or just section missing from the man's stomach, as if something had been tearing into him. The man was dead, until eventually I saw the life come back to his eyes, and he had a deep gasp. Just then, a large dog dropped down on the man from somewhere else in the cave and tore out his newly reappeared organs again and ate them until the man died, and the dog went back to its spot. What the hell? I thought. I was horrified, so I decided to run. I ran outside, and I kept running back into that emptiness, trying to find something, trying to find some way out, but there wasn't anything. As I ran further and further, however, I started to see more of those rotting corpses, and I began to realize that I could tell the way these people died. Some of them had chunks missing from the back of their head. Obviously, they got shot. One man was straight up cut in half, trying to hold his organs in place as he shuffled along. I never saw any of these things too close to each other, though, as every time I saw to get within eye shot of each other, they would full on attack each other with a demonic howl or wail. These people truly are the hounds of hell, I thought. I tried my best to stay away from them because I knew that it would only cause issues if I tried to get anywhere near them. I continued my walk, hoping to find something eventually. Until eventually one of those things, I heard their demonic howl. I grabbed my head and I twisted it, trying to see where they were coming from, and before I knew it, the thing was on top of me, beating me with its hands, tearing at my flesh, ripping me apart, even eating parts of my body while I was still able to watch until it got to my face, and this time it actually did tear out my eyes. And again I woke up with that noose. Again I escaped, and I ran out. I thought back to what had happened to me, and I actually threw up, causing an interesting thing, as all that came out of me was pure water and stomach acid. There was absolutely no food inside of my stomach. Luckily for me, or I should say unluckily, I was able to see my reflection. The parts of my body were rotting off too. My twisted, mangled neck, parts of my skin rotting off and peeling, all covered in pus and blood. And I had that same vacant look in my eyes. And this would have made me feel something, but I hadn't felt anything in a very long time. I walked back into the wasteland where I found another rotting corpse and I tore them apart. For the first time, I was the one tearing someone else apart. And I ate what little of them I had to eat that I could stomach, and I kept moving on. And I kept moving on. Until eventually, I heard an unbelievably loud ringing. So loud that my ears were bleeding, and I fell to the ground. Just as everything seemed to hear its loudness, get at its loudest, everything went quiet. I was in a hospital bed. I couldn't move my neck, but I was able to feel around it and feel that I had a large, partly metal cast. I looked all around to relieved family members. I had been in a coma for about 3 days after a suicide attempt. 3 days? I was only gone for 3 days. It felt like an eternity. I smiled, feeling the first thing I had felt in a long time. Doctors were able to bring me back to life, and that's why I'm writing this story, to let you know. If you ever are thinking that there might be anything for you in the afterlife, let me tell you. If you've committed the smallest sin in your life, if you've told a white lie, if you've so much as squashed a bug, told a white lie, kissed somebody before you were married, what happened to me is what's awaiting you. It's not pretty, but we're all gonna have to deal with it one day. So what I'm trying to tell you is, hell is nothing like they told us.